Hi all, welcome to the first of several productions on Studio C and the SSL console here in the RIM department at MTSU. Over the course of these videos, we're going to be looking at everything from the ins and outs of the console and patch bay to synchronization with the multi-track decks and mixing from Pro Tools. So grab some popcorn, sit back with your feet up and take a few good notes, because here we go. Channel input section. To make things as clear as mud, let's skip over the large massive buttons at the top of the I/O module and move on to the next little section, which I like to affectionately call the channel input section. Sometimes I call it Sweetheart, but that's a whole nother story. Basically, in the input section, you can choose from one of three inputs: line, mic, or subgroup. The line level input can be used for line level sources, including multi-track tape outputs, keyboards, or effects devices. While it could also technically receive input from an elephant's trunk, I'm pretty sure you'd need some kind of A to D converter. Without switching to global statuses, we can switch the input feeding the channel input section by pressing the flip switch. This is indicated by the red light next to the microphone input gain knob. Red and green everywhere. Those Brits must sure be into Christmas. This knob can be turned up to provide up to 70 dB of gain for various types of microphones. The third input is the subgroup input, accessed by pressing, drumroll please, the subgroup button. This button derives its input from that module's group amplifier. For example, we're now on channel 23. As a result, any other module assigned to output 23 will show up here. The next button is a phase reverse button, which reverses the phase of the input signal 180 degrees. This is useful when you have multiple microphones on a single source and phase cancellation problems are occurring. Give this bad boy a flip and see if it doesn't settle the argument. The last button applies 48 volt phantom power to the microphone input for powering condenser microphones and active direct boxes. If you turn this on while most ribbon microphones are plugged into this module, well, congratulations! You now have a multi-$1,000 Christmas tree ornament. Dynamics section. The next stop on the channel strip choo-choo is the dynamics section. Its buttons and knobs are similar to all other compressors that you may use, but with a few special attributes. The ratio knob controls the amount of compression applied to all signals which exceed the level set by the threshold. When the ratio knob is turned all the way to the right, the compressor functions as a peak limiter. The release knob determines how quickly the compressor will stop compressing after the signal has fallen below the threshold. Like a drunken friend getting beat down in a bar, a fast release would stop beating him once he went down, while a slow release would give him a couple extra kicks once he's on the ground. You know, that's a good analogy. I think I'll use that in class. The two controls you don't find are an attack knob and a makeup gain knob. This is because the attack setting is fixed, but can be increased to a faster attack time by pulling up on the release knob. The SSL dynamics section is also equipped with an automatic makeup gain control, which will keep the compressor's output level equal to its input level. The link button tells the compressor on the channel to the right to follow the compression settings of the channel on the left. This is useful for stereo signals coming into two mono channel strips so that they're compressed in equal amounts. The metering for this compressor is found below on the red and yellow LEDs, which, as I know, you've been waiting, introduces a third color to the LED selections on the console. These show only the gain reduction of the compressor section though. The gate section, found below the compressor, can function as either a 2-to-1 expander, with the gate button in the up position, or as a traditional noise gate, with the gate button pressed down. Similar to the compressor, but exactly not, the threshold knob on the gate section sets the input level below which the gate will act. The range knob allows you to choose full noise gate or lesser amounts of expansion. Also, similar to the compressor, the attack time is fixed, but can be made faster by pulling up on the release knob. Metering is accomplished with the green LEDs, which will be fully lit when the gate is completely closed and the range knob is all the way up, and unlit when the gate is open. Kinda like those wireless mics whose red light comes on when the battery is dead. Regardless, the extra lights really serve to instill consumer confidence in your mixes. The dynamics section is put into either of the signal paths, the channel or monitor path, with the Dynamics 2 button. The Channel In button places a dynamics section into the channel path, after the preamp, but before the equalizer. The Channel Out button places a dynamics section after the equalizer, but before the channel output fader. The Monitor button places a dynamics into the monitor path, which we'll usually access with the large VCA fader, as I said before. EQ. Now we get to the cool stuff. If there's one section that you're just itching to abuse more than any other on this console, this is the one. Located right below the dynamics section is the filter section for your water, coffee, or oil. Basically, they allow you to use a steep high-pass or low-pass filter to eliminate all of the high-end or low-end off of your signal. If you're like most beginning engineers, your biggest mixing challenge will be having way too much low-end in your mixes. Judicious use of the low-pass filter can either help clean up some of this musical manure, or, taken too far, will have your musical cow neutered. I'm not sure where this analogy is going, so I'm just going to move on. These can be used in conjunction with a 4-band parametric EQ below, or they can be separated to just after the channel's input by using the split button. The top and bottom bands of the EQ section are a high and low shelving EQ. With their adjustable starting frequency, they can be used to add or cut everything from a shimmery air on the top end of your signal or some thunderous booty-shaking bass. It, like your other 3 bands of EQ on the channel strip, all have plus or minus 15 dB of gain for shaping your sound. Here's a squirrely little button that you won't find on many other consoles. The High-Mid x3 button is here to make sure you don't forget all those hard-earned math skills that you developed in high school. Well, not really. It basically allows you to triple the frequency selected on the high-mid EQ. This allows you to use the high-frequency shelf to triple a setting of, say, 6 kHz, for example, to affect 18 kHz and above. So, in the event that you develop the hearing range of a dog or cave-dwelling bat, this will be really handy for touching up the frequencies us normal humans simply cannot hear. The low-mid divided by 3 button works similarly by allowing you to make a selection of 600 Hz on the low-mid frequency knob and dividing by 3 to make a boost or cut of 200 cycles per second. 600 divided by 3 is 200. Will you use these buttons a lot? No, probably not. Both the high-mid and low-mid sections also have adjustable center frequencies, as well as the 15 dB of gain to cut or boost. But get this. Named for the classic James Bond character, the 2 mid-bands have fully variable Q for creating very narrow filters for notching out problem frequencies, or villains, or very wide bells for adding body or cutting out muddy sounds. They're very handy. Similar to the dynamics section, the equalizer 2 buttons allow you to switch which path is affected by the EQ. The channel button will place the EQ into your channel path, which is typically feeding the tape machine. Or the monitor button will place it in the monitor path, so you can EQ signals coming back from tape during the mixdown process. In short, the channel button will send your EQ'd sound to the tape, while the monitor button will just EQ the sound coming back from tape while they're being mixed down. If you know exactly what kind of sound you're going for, by all means, you press that channel button with your bad self. Otherwise, just use the monitor button to EQ the tape returns, so when you, in a sleep-deprived stupor, really screw up your mix, you can fix it later. You'll thank me later too. The winner of the most abbreviated button on the console award is the Filters to Dynamics Sidechain button. Though printed in hieroglyphics, it allows you to switch the filter section into the dynamics section sidechain. This allows you to create a frequency-conscious gate or compressor for some unique effects. Insert section. In a true testament to British engineering and thinking, the all-knowing designers at SSL saw fit to sneakily hide the insert section in the middle of the equalizers on the SSL I/O module. Utilizing the insert sends and returns on the patch bay, you can patch outboard gear such as high-end compressors, gates, and EQs across the signal path. While the signal is always being sent out of the patch bay insert sends, the in button activates the insert return to receive the signal returning from the outboard device. In other words, if you don't press this button, you will not hear the affected signal. However, if you have one of those annoying artists trying to get you to strap a 3630 or some other piece of junk across their vocal, simply patch it in and don't press the insert in button. The 3630 will light up like a chain smoker at an AA meeting, but the terrible sound will not be returned to your wonderful mix. That tip is free, but the next one will cost you. Finally, while the default status of the console is to insert the device after the EQ section, the pre button will allow you to insert the device before the EQ for a different tonal approach. AUX Echo Sends. In a concentrated effort to confuse you even more thoroughly, our SSL 4000 is equipped with 1 stereo and 4 mono auxiliary sends. Auxiliary sends are what you're going to use for making headphone mixes, as well as to send signal to outboard effects devices such as reverbs and delays. As a result, we're going to give them several different names for no apparent reason, just like the roads here in Murfreesboro. If we're using them to create headphone mixes, we'll call them Q sends. If we're using them to send to any kind of effects processor, we'll call them echo sends, both in practice and on the patch bay, even if we're not sending to an echo. Other things this section will be called in the real world will include such mystery words as foldback, monitor mixes, auxes, and Billy Bob. Okay, I made that last one up. Each send is activated by simply pressing it down and turning the knob clockwise. That's turning it to the right for those of you who've always had a digital watch. I know this sounds simple, but you have no idea how many people will just keep trying to turn it up and completely forget to press it down. Don't be that guy. They can easily be bypassed by pressing them again to restore them to an up position. This can be incredibly handy for A being the sound of a signal going to an effects unit versus the sound of a signal without any effects. Since they have a little more give than any other section of the console, they're also the most comfortable to catch a 10-minute nap on. Just watch out for console rash. Each of the sends can be switched to a pre-fader status by pressing the pre button. This is useful when creating Q mixes, as the amount of signal being sent will not be affected by the large VCA fader when the pre button is pressed. In other words, your mix won't affect what the musician